If you want to think clearly and build a life on your terms, let me tell you about the best book I have ever read. I first read it 5 years ago, and since then I read it almost every single day. As soon as I finish reading it, I start reading it from the start again, and it never fails to blow my mind and shift my perspective. It's one of the core reasons that I've managed to escape my 9 to 5, build a life on my terms, get rid of my stress, my anxiety, and really just do whatever the hell I want. But the name of the book is called Think on These Things by Krishnamurti. And I'm going to share my favorite lessons from the book, but give me 20 seconds and let me explain why this guy is such a badass. Krishnamurti was discovered at 14 years old by the Theosophical Society, and they thought he was going to be their next messiah. Right, and so for 18 years, they were preparing for him to take over their order, which is called the Order of the Star. Right? And thousands of people came to this talk in Holland. And this is in 1929 at age 34, when he was meant to be arising. He stood up and he said, "Truth is a pathless land. No organization can lead man to spirituality. And I desire to set man free of all cages, of all fears." So he dissolved that order, and then he spent the rest of his life talking about the problem of systems, the problems of beliefs, the problem with society, and why you should reject all gurus and all authorities, including himself. I have never read ideas that are so clear, so well thought through, and so well articulated. And so let me give you the 10 best that I have stumbled across and how they will change your life. So point number 1 is that society is a prison that will force you to conform. So one of his most powerful quotes is that it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And I cannot tell you how much this idea resonated with me, because the first 5-10 years of my adult life, I was deeply unhappy with what I was doing, and I didn't understand why. On paper, I had it all, right? Like, I was a dentist, I was a cosmetic dentist. Even within dentistry, I was doing very, very well. I was working all the time. I had a great apartment. And yet, I just couldn't shake this feeling that there was something fucking wrong. Like, something fundamentally not right. Because the more money I was making, the more miserable I was becoming. And to solve that, my solution was more. Make more money, get more successful, go on bigger holidays, all of these things. And it was great. It's like putting a plaster over a wound, but it wasn't actually solving the problem. And Sri Krishnamurti tells you the problem is that there is no freedom in prison. Unless you are aware of the pattern and break free, you are still a prisoner, although you may think you're free. And this is just so hard for us to grasp, because from the very moment we go into education, we are told otherwise. Krishnamurti explains that you're educated to fit into society, but that's not actually education, okay? What they're doing is that they're forcing you to fit inside their framework, because that keeps you as a productive cog in the machine. And if you think about it, your parents don't want you to revolt, your teachers don't want you to revolt, your government doesn't want you to revolt, and so everywhere you turn, there are reasons to not go against the grain. And the thing is, when I first started thinking a little bit more about myself, I was like, okay, look, I want to make more money, but so I can live on my terms. The problem with even this attitude that Krishnamurti explains is that you're not actually revolting, you're just trying to fight for better conditions within the prison. And what you actually have to do is you have to go to the truth of things. You have to go to the court. You have to look around and be like, none of this shit makes any fucking sense. And he explains, you have to be discontent, like everyone's like, oh, I want happiness and contentment. He's like, no, you have to be seriously discontent with what's going on around you, because that is the catalyst towards truth. And the thing is, when you begin to understand the patterns, when you begin to see the way that people are miserable and see the way that we hold ourselves back from going after what we want and we don't let ourselves be creative, as soon as you start to see it, you're like, that doesn't make so much sense. And within that, you then start getting the freedom to act. Now, one of the funny things about society is that we are constantly selling each other the dream of happiness. But Krishnamurti explains that happiness does not come when you strive for it. It comes when you stop seeking. Now, maybe this might resonate for you, but every time I have thought that something would make me happy, the process of getting the thing, I have been unhappy because I don't feel like I'm enough until I have it. The winning of the thing, I'm happy for a day or two, maybe a week, and then it goes away and I'm thinking about what's next. The thing I'm chasing will always change, but the pattern is the same. When I was a dentist, I thought that money was going to make me happy. And then when I was unhappy as a dentist, I thought that being free would make me happy. And when I quit my job, I thought, oh no, I just need to get recognized as a writer to become happy. And then when I was writing, I was like, okay, well, once I make this much money, I'll be happy. Now, I'm telling myself once I write my book, I'll be happy. But the pursuit of more is why you cannot be satisfied with less. And Krishnamurti explains that the way that you are truly happy is A, you don't go around trying to be happy, and B, subtraction. You remove the things that get in the way of your happiness instead. So he explains, when the thing that prevents happiness are gone, when the anxiety, the frustration, the search for one's own security ceased, then happiness is there and you don't have to seek it. And this is really, really hard for our Western minds that have been conditioned to think otherwise, right? Like we are bombarded with the fact that we are not enough. But if you just begin to start to remove the things that are making you unhappy, you create the space to like almost realize like, oh, I don't really need this goal of happiness. I'm just content. Now, one little tip on the happiness thing from Krishnamurti is that for happiness to emerge, you must have a mind that is free from fear. As long as you're afraid of anyone or anything, there can be no happiness, he says. And so let me tell you what he explains about the problem with the mind. And before I do, by the way, if you are enjoying this and you want to be a writer, you like the idea of writing, you like the idea of ideas, you would love my copywriting handbook, The Sucks Framework. It just shows you how to articulate yourself better. It takes 2 minutes to read. I guarantee whatever you're writing will be a lot better and you'll make more of an impact. It's a whole lot more fun. You can get the link down below. Otherwise, let's move on to Krishnamurti's next idea, and that is the problem with education. Education teaches you what to think, not how to think. So the way he puts it is that true learning, true intelligence is when you know how to think, not what to think. In fact, if anyone is telling you what to think, it's the opposite of intelligence because they're thinking for you. Now, this was a kick in the teeth for me because I used to take so much pride in my ideas. You know, like I can rehash to you a million quotes from all the books that I've read. And I used to brag about the fact that I'd read 2 books a week. And I thought that I was so smart because I could regurgitate like a button and someone would say something. I'd be like, oh yeah, that's like so-and-so, blah-de-blah, look at me. But Krishnamurti explains you are merely repeating a formula that has been handed down to you. And that particularly in like tricky areas that these occur are not in the stuff that you don't believe, but the things that you never even question, right? It's not just what you've learned at school. It is every single thing that you think about, that you believe, that you have been told, that you're pursuing, that you think about in relationships, that you think about in success. Almost no thoughts of your own. Okay, not until you sit down with them and start to truly analyze and think, is this the truth? As Krishnamurti explains all the time, no one can tell you the truth, not even him. Okay, the truth is something that you work out, and you don't work that out by staying at the surface layer and being like, oh yeah, this thing's important. And you're thinking, well, actually, where did that come from? And how am I thinking clearly, or not clearly in this case, about many of these things? You know, my classic example, the way that kind of screwed me over when I was younger, was that I thought that money made you happy. And I just never questioned that scripture. I come from a working class background, northeast of England. There's such a huge scarcity mindset there. Everyone judges people with money, everyone wants money, and you end up in this horrible limbo. And I was like, oh my God, my entire life is being controlled by this bit of paper that's not actually real, that is an agreed story amongst other people. And my self-worth is tied to my bank balance and my ability to produce for a society. Like, it makes no fucking sense. And once I began to see that money is actually just energy, and the way that we make it is by providing value and then using that money to do more things that I want, i.e. provide more value or go explore the world, it became so goddamn freeing because I wasn't terrified every month when my income would go down because I was doing something that wasn't directly related to making money. When beforehand, that would just make me feel like a failure. And so, like you said, the whole problem is education with this, okay? The only reason he explains that you accept authority or that I accept authority is because you think that there's something to gain by listening to other people, you know? And this is true of your favorite. Think of your favorite guru and they tell you what to do and you're like, oh, that person's right. It's because you want what they want, okay? And you say, Krishnamurti explains, the only reason you want to be famous is because everyone else wants to be famous. You're all agreeing to like this dance when actually it's like, well, do I actually want anything that people have been telling me is important? And the problem Krishnamurti explains, right, especially when it comes back to happiness, is that our whole education is based around the fact that you need to change who you are, that you are not enough until you get more. And the problem with that is that you're no longer thinking clearly, because within that you have envy, within there you have fear, within there you have hate, all of these negative emotions that stop you actually seeing the world as it is, that stop you operating in the way that you want to operate. And that makes you easy to control. When I first heard that, I was like, oh, I'm not controllable. I'm thinking for myself. Like, the more I've learned about what Krishnamurti and a few other thinkers like Osho, Anthony de Mello, when I more learn about that, I'm like, oh my God, you are such a sheep. And now I'm always thinking I'm still a sheep right now, right? Because the aim is you're never going to be right. You're just going to be less wrong over time. So when you start going down this path, it's a bit uncomfortable because you're like, man, everything I thought was real isn't. And then you have to rebuild from there. And this leads me to our next point from Krishnamurti. I mentioned about fear. Krishnamurti explains that fear is the enemy of freedom and that fear is the enemy of intelligence. So, and I quote, just, do you know what intelligence is? It is the capacity to think freely, without fear, without a formula. And it's super interesting, okay? Because when we are scared, we present a side of ourselves so that we appear smart or secure or like we have it all figured out. But I mean, for me anyway, like when I was younger and even now, like I'm scared of what people think of me. I'm scared of being rejected. I'm scared of not being enough, all of these things. And they're so fucking bad for the way that you behave, like the judgments you make, the stories you tell yourself, the things you go after. You're like, I can't do that thing because I'm not good enough, or I have to do this thing because this is what's going to make me more acceptable in the eyes of others, or, you know, I should do this because I once told someone 5 years ago that this is important. Like, it is absolutely crazy the things we will do out of fear. And what Krishnamurti says is that where there is fear, there is no intelligence. You're thinking based on what other people are telling you all the time, okay? You're like a scared little child. You're like, instead of giving yourself permission, you're always seeking permission from the people around you. And so he explains, to be free, you must be free of fear. And this is going to lead me to the next point, and it's probably the hardest one for particularly us in a Western culture, particularly if you're in a similar shoes as me, where you're a hustle bro, internet dude of a personal brand. And that is that ambition destroys intelligence. Krishnamurti explains that the moment we want something, we are no longer free. We become deaf to the signals of life. And the problem is, with our society, we've been told that ambition is a good thing. You know, the more you advance yourself, the happier you'll be, the more fulfilled, the more content you'll be. Now, you only need to look around and realize how fucking wrong that is. You can see how many celebrities are miserable. You can see like the people in high positions of power, like the crazy shit that they do. Ambition is blinding, okay? And so Krishnamurti explains that he's not suggesting, by the way, that we all sit around and smoke weed on the beach and relax. It's like, if you do not find something in your life that has deep significance, that you do for the love of doing it, right? You will always be miserable. You will always be scared. You will always be wondering what's next. And so he explains that ambition is not the answer, it's attention. In his eyes, attention isn't just, your ability to focus. Attention is this opening where you can really appreciate everything in life, the good, the bad. You're seeing everything, because if you're operating in that state, if you're seeing the script, if you're seeing the stories, if you're just paying attention to the world around you, there is so much beauty within it that you then begin to do the things that you were made to do. And so this leads me to the next lesson from Krishnamurti, and the one that probably changed my life the most, and that is the key to all things is to love what you do. So he explains, you will find the right answer when you are loving what you are doing, not to gain recognition, but just because you love to do it. And then you find you will never compete with another person again. And I'll just read out the other quote that is my most highlighted in this book. Real life is doing something in which you love to do with your whole inner being, so that there is no inner contradiction. Out of that love comes an extraordinary feeling of creativity. And the thing here, so when I was a dentist, for example, I didn't love what I did. And so I was always comparing to the people ahead of me. Like, I remember this time where, I was working all the time and making a lot of money. I'm sitting in traffic in my crappy car and I'm like, maybe I should buy a Maserati, or maybe I should buy a Jaguar. Why? Because I deserve it, because those people have it, right? And that attitude happens all the time. You have a beautiful relationship and you're like, that person's got a hotter girlfriend than me. They seem so much happier than I am. And you're just constantly comparing. But when you actually love what you do, when you wake up every morning, you're like, fuck yeah, I get to sit down and write this thing because I believe in it and I wholeheartedly love the process. You just don't care anymore about most of the crap you're told to care about. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's a little bit scary, right? Particularly when all these things you've been told to chase just don't seem right anymore. Joe Hudson describes it, similar thing, as a feeling of falling, like it's almost like a purposelessness. But the thing is, you cannot fall because there's nowhere to land. And falling and freedom are the exact same thing. Okay, and so that feeling when you are falling and you're free, out of that emerges this, like he says, this creativity to do the things that you want. And ironically, that is how you make your highest contribution in the world. Not by trying to perform in the eyes of others, but finding the thing that really lights you up and saying, I'm going to do this regardless of how it goes because I believe in it. So I'm going to give you 2 more tips. Number 1 is the key to transforming your life. So we all want to transform our life, right? And Krishnamurti explains that the desire to transform your life is the reason why you're not transforming. The desire to change is the reason why you do not change. And actually, what he explains is the key to transformation is so much simpler, and that's why we overlook it, and it's understanding. This blew my mind because I am a self-improvement addicted guy, particularly when I was younger. I read every book. I would have cold showers every morning, do all these hard things, and yes, they did improve my life. But the biggest changes in my life, the things that I actually wanted, the things that made me happy, the fact that I'm living in South America now and I'm not building a business that doesn't feel completely aligned with me, and I'm writing books and I'm just giving myself to my craft and I'm learning Spanish, all this stuff only began to happen when I just began to understand, when I began to observe. And why does this happen? I mentioned it towards the start. When you see that you're doing wrong, or that something isn't right anymore, you can't do anything but change, okay? Like I said, there's that quote from Socrates, no man does wrong knowingly. It's when you start to see the truth, or what you think is the truth, your behavior changes naturally with it. And so instead of thinking, there's something wrong with me that I need to fix, you just need to look around and be there's something really wrong with everything here. And you just begin to naturally emerge. Anthony Domenico is a tree doesn't need to be shouted at to change. We have David Goggins screaming at it, and it's one of the most beautiful things in the world. You are too. And so what Krishnamurti explains is that one of the most difficult things in life is to not be bound by an idea. You have to unravel the script, and the way you do that is to sit quietly. Just sit quietly and observe. And so, for example, I've always been a fan of meditation, but I would stop and start. I'll get the apps, I'll do the thing, I'd have my little streaks. I'm this meditation is going to make me think clearer and be happier. And when I started studying Krishnamurti, I was even if, and he explains this, if you meditate with an objective, then you're not meditating because you're meditating to gain. And actually, all you need to do is have faith that if you just observe, things will start to change. So I haven't missed a day of meditation in 2 years now, because I will just sit and I will just, if I want to watch my mind, or if I find my mind wanting to do this or do that, and I'm just watching that. And the space that you create by being an observer of your thoughts is incredible, because you no longer do the stupid shit that you were doing before. I can give you an example. A really common one as writers is you go on social media, you see all these people going viral with this bullshit content, and you're I should do that too because I want to go viral and I want to be famous like them, which is what the platform is designed to do, by the way. So you're just jumping into someone else's script. And I've fallen for that bloody more than you can imagine when I was younger as a writer, and I felt very insecure with my content. And now if I go on social media and I see all this crap, and I can feel my body being you could write that, why don't you just go write some of these and you get to go do all that stuff. And I can just watch that thought and be because I don't fucking want to. It doesn't make any sense. And that happens in all of your decisions when you learn to observe your thoughts. And so what Krishnamurti explains is that if you can observe alertly, keenly, but without judging, which is the key, by the way. Not to be oh, you dumb idiot, how could you think that? But just to be how interesting is that? Without concluding, then you will find that your thinking becomes astonishingly acute. And with that, you become tremendously alive. And so I want to give you one final point, and this is about judgment. And this has been the best tool for judgment I've ever had. When I first started studying the mind stuff, I was learning all the decision-making frameworks, going through Bezos' stuff and going Farnham Street and all of this. It was I want to have really good judgment. The best way to see your judgment is in relationships. Relationships are a mirror for how you see yourself, Krishnamurti explains. Not as you wish you would be, but how you actually are. Let me give you an example. The thing that you judge other people for is the thing you judge yourself for. And that, my friend, will short circuit your mind like nothing else. But if you actually accept that, you will begin to see how you're being controlled or how you're not thinking clearly. So, for example, I used to always judge people that were flashy with money. Look at you, you fucking idiot. You're such a sheep in society because you make money just to show off to other people. But actually, that judgment is just showing you that the stories that you're still bought into is two sides of the same coin. They're going, hey, look at what I have. And you're going, oh, look at how shallow you are, okay? You're still part of the script. You're still part of an untruth, okay? You're still thinking about something that's not actually real. And this happens all the time. If you see that you're judging other people for any form of behavior, you are controlled by that too, okay? You're still just subscribed to a script that's not helpful. And the thing with the relationships being a mirror also is that you get to see the way you behave in response to others. And so, for example, I used to be and still can be quite an insecure guy. And I noticed that if I was, meeting someone, let's say I'm going on a date, I would, particularly in the past, not so much now, which is quite a relief, but I would try to predict every single conversation that I'm going to have. Okay. And I thought that was me being smart. That's me being suave or like being a fun person to date. But actually, that's just because I'm terrified of them rejecting. And that relationship is a mirror, because I would tell myself I was a confident guy because, the dates would go well. But that's not confidence. Confidence is presence. Confidence is just doing and being the person you are and saying, hey, like me or not, this is who I am and I love myself. The moment you need to perform for other people is just a sign saying that you don't believe that you are enough. And so relationships are a mirror. One more thing with that, it doesn't just have to be with people. It's relationships to the objects around you too. So for example, think about the way that money shows up in your life. Anytime that you are attached to something or someone, there's a script running. And that script makes you controllable. That script is not clear thinking. Even if you think it's important, someone else has told you that, or a society has told you that. And then you could just question everything, not from a judgment point of view, not because you feel like your life is going to get better, because if you're doing any of this work to improve yourself, you're still not doing the work. Okay? All you need to do is understand. All you need to do is think on these things. I hope you found it useful. This book genuinely has changed my life. I would really recommend you pick it up and also read all his other stuff and watch his stuff on YouTube. And speaking of YouTube, if you like my stuff, make sure you hit the subscribe button below, hit the bell. I'm releasing videos twice a week. And if you are interested in clear thinking, I created a video recently explaining the craziest conversation I've had in my life that was one of the biggest catalysts for going after what I wanted. I promise you hear this story, you'll be like, oh my God, damn, it should be on the screen right now. Thank you for watching.